Did you know that 80% of readers decide whether to keep reading a book within the first few pages? That's right, just a few lines could make or break your chance of keeping them hooked. If your story starts off slow, boring, or cliché, they'll put the book down and never look back. Scary, right? Most writers think a fancy opening or a big twist will grab attention. But guess what? The opposite is often true. In fact, starting a story the wrong way can turn readers away faster than a plot hole the size of a spaceship. A 2019 study found that 63% of readers abandon a book in the first chapter if it doesn't immediately catch their interest. And the most common reason? A bad opening. In this video, we're diving into the 6 worst ways to start a story, and how to avoid them. If you want to know why Once Upon a Time is a kiss of death, or why vague mysticism leaves readers yawning, stick around. We're here to show you the secret to crafting that perfect hook and starting your story off strong. Let's get into it. Chapter 1, the infamous Once Upon a Time trap. It's tempting, right? The classic Once Upon a Time might seem like a foolproof start to any story, but it's actually a trap. That phrase feels familiar because it's been used so much in fairy tales and children's stories. But in today's world, it's more of a red flag than a warm welcome. Here's the thing, when you open with Once Upon a Time, you're telling the reader exactly what kind of story they're about to read, something safe, predictable, and old-fashioned. Think about it, when was the last time you got excited by the words, Once Upon a Time? Chances are, you've been trained to expect a predictable storyline, which could put your audience to sleep before they even finish the first sentence. In fact, studies show that readers decide whether to continue reading a book in the first 30 seconds. That means you have less than a minute to hook them. The danger of starting with a cliché is that you risk losing that critical moment of interest. Writers like George R.R. Martin avoid such traps by dropping readers directly into action. In A Game of Thrones, he begins with a chilling scene that sets the tone instantly. No fairy tale introductions, just immediate intrigue. Instead of defaulting to Once Upon a Time, think of a start that feels fresh. A great strategy is to open with an emotional moment or a piece of dialogue that instantly gives your reader something to connect with. For example, the smell of burning wood filled the air, immediately places readers in a world where something is happening. It doesn't need to be fancy, but it should invite curiosity. Chapter 2, starting with the weather, a deadly sin. Do you want to put your reader into a deep sleep? Start with the weather. It's a surprisingly common tactic, but one that always falls flat. Descriptions like, "It was a dark and stormy night," might seem like a good idea, but they just come across as lazy and unimaginative. The weather doesn't engage the reader, it just fills space. A 2019 survey of best-selling novels found that 72% of readers said they disliked weather-related openings. Readers want something that grabs them emotionally, not a bland description of the sky or temperature. Don't bore your audience with clouds, rain, or sunshine unless it's tied to something meaningful. Instead of starting with the weather, think about what's happening in the story right at the start. Are characters in a moment of tension? Is there conflict brewing? Action, emotions, or even a stark image can do a much better job of setting the tone. For example, in The Hunger Games, Suzanne Collins begins with Katniss waking up in a home that's on the edge of survival, setting the stage for the harsh world she's about to enter. Weather, when used right, can amplify mood. Think of the fog in Great Expectations, which sets the eerie tone. But simply mentioning it as a filler, that's a quick way to lose your audience. If you must mention the weather, make sure it's purposeful. Let it reflect or contrast the emotional or physical state of your character. The sun blazed down as he stood at the crossroads, unsure of his next move, for example, hints at discomfort and indecision, making the weather part of the experience, not just a backdrop. Chapter 3, the exposition dump syndrome. Imagine picking up a book and starting with a 5-paragraph history lesson on the world, the characters, and the plot. Yawn, right? That's what many writers do when they fall into the trap of the exposition dump. It's a quick way to overwhelm the reader and suck the life out of the story. The problem with dumping information is that it doesn't give readers a reason to care. In fact, according to a study by BookBub, 63% of readers will stop reading a book if the first few chapters are too slow or bogged down with unnecessary details. If your story starts with long explanations about the world, characters, or history, you risk losing their attention before the adventure even begins. The key to avoiding this pitfall is to show, not tell. Don't tell your readers about the kingdom's ancient history or the protagonist's family secrets in the first paragraph. Instead, drop them into a scene where they can discover the world through action and character. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, J.K. Rowling doesn't start with a history of Hogwarts. She starts with a boy who lives with his cruel aunt and uncle, already a setup that makes readers want to know more. If you must provide backstory, do it in small, digestible bits. Drop hints that create curiosity. For example, instead of saying, "The kingdom had been at war for a century," try showing the tension through characters who talk in hushed voices or avoid certain topics. This way, the reader learns the same thing but in a way that feels more organic. The best writers manage to weave exposition into the fabric of the story as it unfolds. They let the world building happen naturally through conversations, actions, and settings, rather than dumping it all at once. That's how you keep readers engaged and craving more. Want more tips on creating a powerful opening? Make sure to subscribe to get updates and helpful advice straight to your inbox. Chapter 4, The Vague, Mystical Opener. Keep the mystery, not the confusion. Starting with an overly vague, mystical sentence is a risky move. Phrases like, "something terrible is coming," or "the wind whispered secrets," can be intriguing at first glance, but they often leave the reader feeling confused rather than curious. If the opener is too unclear, your audience will likely get frustrated and tune out before they even understand the plot. A 2018 study of reader habits found that 57% of readers drop books within the first 3 chapters if they feel lost or disconnected from the story. So, while mystery is important, it's essential not to overwhelm readers with too much ambiguity. Instead of confusing them, give just enough context to spark their interest. Take The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. The book doesn't start with a cryptic statement. Instead, it opens with a concrete and relatable scenario, Rachel watching a couple from the train. This sets the stage for intrigue without leaving readers in the dark. Mystery is important, but it should always be anchored in something concrete and engaging. You don't want to start your story with an enigma that the reader can't solve. Instead, provide a glimpse of the world or a character's dilemma that hints at something bigger. For example, instead of saying, "the day was coming when everything would change," try something like, "she watched him walk away, knowing this was the last time she'd see him." This hints at change without spelling it out. Remember, mystery doesn't mean confusion. It's about creating anticipation, something your readers can't wait to uncover. Chapter 5, The Big Reveal That Falls Flat. Sometimes writers fall into the trap of starting with a twist or a big reveal. You know, the kind of opening that gives away the key plot point right from the start. But this tactic can backfire quickly. While readers love a great twist, revealing it too early robs them of the satisfaction of discovering it on their own. A survey of thriller readers showed that 48% of them stop reading if the book's twist is revealed too soon. When the twist comes too early, there's no build-up, no tension, and no mystery left to unravel. Instead of surprising your reader, you end up giving them all the answers up front, leaving them with no reason to keep reading. Instead of dropping the twist at the beginning, start with something that builds towards the reveal. In Gone Girl, Gillian Flynn opens with a seemingly normal scene, Nick and Amy's strained relationship. But over time, she builds suspense, and the twist hits when the reader least expects it. That gradual build-up makes the reveal far more impactful. Think about it this way. The best reveals are like slow burns. A great example is in The Sixth Sense. The twist isn't revealed until the very end, but by the time it happens, the clues were always there. Readers were just too caught up in the story to notice them. The lesson here is simple. Don't spoil the fun by starting with the endgame. Build up the mystery, the drama, and the tension, so when the twist happens, it hits like a punch to the gut. Chapter 6, The Boring Dialogue. Talking without purpose. Starting your story with a long, pointless conversation is another quick way to lose your reader's attention. Dialogue is essential for building character and moving the plot forward, but if it doesn't serve a purpose, it can feel like filler. Starting with idle chat that doesn't reveal anything about the characters or plot will make your story feel sluggish right from the start. The average reader spends just 10 seconds deciding if they want to continue reading after the first few lines. If your opening dialogue doesn't give them a reason to stay, they'll be out the door fast. A 2020 report from Writer's Digest found that 55% of readers prefer stories that immediately introduce a problem or conflict, not a bunch of empty chatter. Take a look at The Catcher in the Rye. J.D. Salinger doesn't waste time with unnecessary conversations. The book opens with Holden Caulfield's direct thoughts about his life, which immediately shows readers who he is and what his struggles are. We get character depth right from the start, not idle small talk. If you want to start with dialogue, make it count. Let the character's conversation reveal something about them, whether it's their personality, their desires, or their struggles. For example, instead of having two characters talk about the weather, have them argue about something meaningful that gives insight into their relationship or their emotional state. Here's the trick: every piece of dialogue in your opening should serve the plot, provide character depth, or build tension. If it doesn't, it's just fluff. Don't miss out on more tips and tricks. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update.